Celebrating 46 years on the air, award-winning Farmweek is a production of Mississippi State University Extension.
Today on Farmweek, still on radar, foreign ownership of American farmland. The feds and Mississippi leaders are talking about it. On the lighter side, it's fall, time for a jaunt through a Jurassic corn maze. In southern gardening, some call them Periwinkle, some call them Vincas. Whatever you call them, they're gorgeous. And in our feature, one more chance to meet the reigning loggers of the year. Farmweek starts right now.
Hello everyone, I'm Zach Ashmore.
And I'm Mike Russell. Great to have you with us again here on Farm Week. This week we continue to hear more about foreign ownership of American farmland and assets. In fact, so much has been said about it that the Senate Ag Committee met to discuss it recently. Just one in a continuous series of discussions we're likely to hear more about. Farm Week's Jonah Holland is in studio with more. Jonah?
Thanks, Mike. The Senate Ag Committee did meet on this topic in late September. More than a dozen states have enacted some legislation on this subject in 2023. But as the committee heard, the nationality of the biggest landowner is already in North America. Peter Tubbs has more.
The Senate Agriculture Committee met Wednesday to discuss the rate of purchases of farmland by foreign entities and questioned witnesses over the security risks of American farmland being owned by the Chinese government. While only 3% of the 1 billion acres of American farmland are owned by foreign interests, roughly the size of the state of Iowa, that percentage has increased 50% in the last 10 years. Most of the foreign owners reside in Canada and Europe. Less than 1% of the foreign-owned land is under Chinese control, with Smithfield Foods holding 80% of China's share. In accordance with the Agriculture Foreign Investment Disclosure Act of 1978, the Department of Agriculture collects data on land ownership, but the reporting process is voluntary.
We've been working to address consolidation efforts and have a collaboration with attorney generals throughout the country to be able to address that. With regards to AFIDA, AFIDA itself is a disclosure act, and that is the authorities that we have. USDA does not have the authority to approve or decline purchases of land, domestic or foreign.
Experts testified that while China has significant investments in American agriculture, farmland has not been a target.
By and large, China's foreign investments in farmland have bypassed North America. They're really looking at acquiring agribusinesses like Smithfield. We saw ChemChina's takeover of Syngenta, and this is to exert more control over their import food supply chain. And I do foresee there being additional investments in this regard. But when it comes to actual American farmland, it's not something that I would consider as part of their current foreign investment strategy in agriculture.
So, there are conflicting reports about how much and where U.S. farmland is being purchased by other countries, especially China. With rising global tensions, it's a political hot button and likely will be for some time. Mike?
Thanks, Jonah. And it is a political hot button. As you heard, a number of states have enacted legislation to limit or prevent foreign ownership. One of those considering new rules on the subject is Mississippi, which created a study committee for that very purpose. That committee, known officially as the Study Committee on the Foreign Purchase of Farmland in Mississippi, recently held its second meeting at the state capitol in Jackson. Attorney Micah Brown of the National Agriculture Law Center, a nonpartisan source of authoritative ag and food law research and information, was a special presenter. As the state and the committee weave their way through what's sure to be a complicated process of developing a law, Ag Commissioner Andy Gibson issued a statement. In that statement, he said, quote, "I can tell the sentiment of the people of Mississippi is that this is a major issue that needs to be addressed. There's nothing I talk about that gets more of a response from the people of this state than this issue. Something as simple as keeping American agriculture American." Mississippi's 9-member committee includes Commissioner Gibson, the State Attorney General, the chairman of the House and Senate Judiciary Committees, and the offices of the Governor and Lieutenant Governor. They'll meet again on October 19th.
One of the largest and most intricate corn mazes in the entire country is in Minnesota. John Lauritsen takes us to Stony Brook Farms near Foley, Minnesota, to show us how the maze gets a little more amazing every year.
Definitely small town USA, everybody knows everybody.
That's because many of the families that live in Foley have been here for generations. They are as rooted as the crops they grow.
We start in the spring with asparagus. We do sugar snap peas, green beans, broccoli. We roll into sweet corn, which is our biggest crop.
Brad Shimoleski and his family run Stony Brook Farms. They grow vegetables for grocery stores, but not all of their corn ends up in a supermarket.
And then you decide somewhere along the line, we should make a maze.
Our first year we started, it was just basically a pumpkin with kind of a maze, in there.
From a simple pumpkin in 2016 to one of the largest mazes in the world. Last year, Stony Brook put together an extremely detailed maze full of scary movie characters, and they did it all in 110 acres of corn, totaling 15 miles of pathways.
We had Jason Voorhees, we had Freddy Krueger, Pennywise the Clown from It, we had Chucky, cool different stuff like that.
They also saw their number of visitors jump 500% from the year before, with people coming from around the world. This year, there's a Jurassic Park theme.
This is actually in the tractor cab with us when we're planting.
After he gets an idea, Brad works with a company called Maze Play to design his autumn adventure. Then he uses the best of farm technology to get the labyrinth just right.
If you actually zoom in on it a little bit, you can actually see there's lines, and each one of those little lines there is a planter pass.
Going a steady 3 miles an hour. The program tells his tractor where to drop seeds in the spring, so he gets this in the fall. This year, instead of strolling through Freddy Krueger's head, visitors can walk through the neck of a brontosaurus.
So the neck is that way.
Yeah, neck is that way, and the T-Rex and the Stegosaurus are over that way.
They also made this maze cheat-proof by planting the corn stalks tightly together and in 2 different directions, so you can't bust right through it.
The record for getting through the most difficult maze last year was 40 minutes, but some people can spend hours trying to find their way.
You've never gotten lost?
I haven't gotten lost.
Not yet, anyway.
If you do, you just keep on going in one direction and you'll hit a road eventually.
But for most visitors, it's less about the end result and more about the journey.
It's a ton of fun. We're blown away by the people who just say, thank you for doing this. Really, next year we don't know what we're going to do, so if you have any suggestions, let me know.
In Southern gardening this week, they call them Vincas, and they can be a fabulous color splash. Plus, they're great for experienced gardeners or beginners. But here's the thing. Vinca comes from the Greek word to conquer, which is perfect because they can dominate the landscape in so many good ways. Here's Dr. Eddie Smith with more.
I believe Vincas are the ideal landscape plant as they provide a pop of color in summer and in fall. There are many varieties to choose from that are heat and drought tolerant. The Pacifica XP Polka Dot Vinca is a delightful plant that can add an element of sophistication and beauty to any garden. Its bright white petals with delicate pink eyes are eye-catching and unique. The Cora XDR Pink Halo Vinca is also a stunning plant that is sure to impress. Its vibrant pink petals contrast beautifully with its dark green leaves, creating a striking visual effect. Another Cora series Vinca that is sure to have your neighbors talking is Cora XDR Cranberry. It is a breathtaking plant that is sure to make a statement in any garden. Its deep cranberry-colored petals are eye-catching and striking against the backdrop of its lush green leaves. The Mega Bloom Orchid Halo Vinca is a truly captivating plant with unique bright fuchsia blossoms and a wide white eye. Its delicate orchid-like blooms are simply stunning and make a beautiful addition to any garden. All of these Vincas bloom profusely throughout the summer and fall, creating a stunning display of color that will last for months. Vincas are low maintenance and easy to care for, making them perfect for beginner gardeners. I'm Eddie Smith, and I will see you next time on Southern Gardening.
We'll take a break right here, but don't go away. Coming up on our Farm Week feature, one more chance to meet the reigning loggers of the year. Their business goes all the way back to 1982, 40-plus years of harvesting one of the most valuable commodities in the world. They're not easy businesses to be in, both logging and trucking, but in their own words, they keep coming back to the woods year after year and doing it better than most. The 2022 Loggers of the Year. That's coming up on Farm Week. Don't go away.
I believe in people and their hopes, their aspirations and their faith, and their right to make their own plans and arrive at their own decisions, and their ability and power to enlarge their lives and plan for the happiness of those they love. I believe that education, of which extension work is an essential part, is basic in stimulating individual initiative, self-determination, and leadership. That these are the keys to democracy, and that people, when given facts they understand, will act not only in their self-interest, but also in the interest of society. Because I believe these things, I am an extension professional.
I believe in people and their hopes, their aspirations, and their faith. I believe in intellectual freedom to search for and present the truth without bias and with courteous tolerance toward the views of others. I believe that education is a lifelong process, and the greatest university is the home. That my success as a teacher is proportional to those qualities of mind and spirit that give me welcome entrance to the homes of the families I serve. Because I believe these things, I am an extension professional.
Time for the market report, still trending down.
That's right, Mike, but it's only a slow burn. We'll get into the reasons why. But first, the numbers. We'll take a look at last week's biggest gains and losses, and then in our row report, we look into ongoing drought and a lower Mississippi River. And finally, what's moving the cattle markets right now? So, markets closed last week, still trending down, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Some commodities still pretty high in price overall. Let's take a look. Last week's biggest gain, wheat up 23 3/4 cents. That's a near 5% rise from the previous week and a slight rebound from falling prices over the last month. Last week's biggest loss, lumber, down $8 over a 1.5% drop from the previous week. This week in our row report, we take a look at the ongoing drought and how it has or has not affected row crops this year. We already know hay prices up in the livestock sector, but in row crops, things are actually looking pretty good. One of the reasons prices haven't risen a lot. I spoke with MSU Extension row crop economist Will Maples to see how things are faring in Mississippi and beyond. Okay, Will, so how has the ongoing drought affected grain prices in Mississippi and the U.S.?
Yes, so the ongoing drought has been an issue. We really saw it back in the summertime when we were trying to figure out what yields were going to be, and we saw prices ride up in July higher. It's looking like it's going to be a little bit better year than we initially thought back in the middle of when the drought was really hitting hard back in the summertime. So prices have come down a little bit, but it's still providing quite a good support to the market overall.
Well, with that ongoing drought, we also have lower levels of the Mississippi River. How's that affected crops in the state?
Yeah, so that's one thing. So we've had a pretty good drought here in Mississippi, but our yields are so far looking pretty decent. But the overall drought in the Midwest is still impacting us from those lower river levels. The main thing that's doing is, all their elevators on the river that rely on barge freight, those freight prices are going up. They're not able to run as many barges in a group, and they're having to not load as much grain on them to keep them shallow. And what that's doing is the basis farmers are getting over on the river has just plummeted. So we saw the same thing happen last year, and we're starting to see the same thing develop this year. And with those lower basis levels, what that means is producers aren't getting paid as much as they would have in a normal year without the low river levels.
All right, well, speaking of exports, though, we know that Mexico recently bought or purchased a lot of grain for the United States, corn to be exact. And how's that going to affect corn prices going forward?
Yes, so they came in a couple weeks ago and bought the third largest on record corn purchase from the U.S. And this was kind of a surprise to the market because we are still in the middle of a trade negotiations dispute with Mexico. They're pretty soon plan to stop importing all non-GMO corn. Importing GMO corn for human consumption into Mexico. So seeing this large purchase right now, it's kind of been it's a positive to the market because exports are not going in as fast as we'd hoped to Mexico. There's a lot of uncertainty. So it's really one of two things. It's either they're trying to buy up a lot of corn before that ban goes into effect, or hopefully what we want to see is that it means they still want to buy U.S. corn, and going forward that will provide support to our prices.
As a matter of fact, we did cover that story on Farm Week recently about Mexico's upcoming ban on all GMO corn for human consumption.
Yep.
They're still allowing it for animal consumption. So I suppose the proper assumption there is that all U.S. corn, once this ban goes into effect, that they import is going straight to the animals to grow them. Is that right?
Yes, that should be the assumption. If that ban goes into effect, it is only for human consumption, and our corn will continue to feed their very large and growing livestock feeding industry they have started to develop.
Moving on to cattle, prices still high despite them slowly falling. Analyst Sue Martin says, right now things look stable because of the season. But as we get past fall, there's another factor at play that could see prices rise once again.
I will have to say I'm still bullish cattle, but you know, for now, okay, it's interest rates, the hikes, so that started to affect buying feeders. It's more costly, of course. The other thing is that you have all this talk about, okay, like the stock market's had a tough week or so, and so that, you know, there's an old saying, as go the stock market, so goes cattle. And you have a lot of competitive meats out there, the poultry industry, the pork. And so that's, I think, right now trying to play a little bit of havoc on us. But seasonality, you normally will take feeder cattle and set them back into October. Some years we've even made it into November. But I think around October 14th, somewhere in there, we're going to try to stick a low. And what might happen is we may have seen a low today or very close to it, and then start to chop around and meander. But ultimately, I believe this market's going much higher. We have yet to go through what is called the whiplash effect in cattle. And that's when you start seeing a holdback of heifers for breeding purposes. And so then that tightens supplies even further.
And that's it for a deeper look into the markets. Harvest close to done and yields looking better than anticipated. Prices still on the higher end, though. We'll see how it develops. Mike?
Thank you, Zach. Soon we'll be announcing the 2023 Logger of the Year. But before that happens, one more chance to meet the reigning winners. The two men you're about to meet have been partners for 4 decades. They work in the southern part of the state, and both say there's nothing else they'd rather be doing. Meet the owners of DNR Logging.
It's said often, but bears repeating, that the forests of Mississippi are among the most breathtaking natural resources in the state. Nearly 20 million acres are wooded, and besides being a source of pride, beauty, and recreation, the trees harvested in Mississippi represent an extraordinary industry. In fact, forestry had an economic impact of more than $1.3 billion last year. Considering the challenges of the last few years, those revenue figures are amazing. The loggers who contribute to that economic footprint in Mississippi are a critical part of the backbone of that industry, which is why every year the Mississippi Forestry Association honors the outstanding Logger of the Year. In 2022, that logger is DNR Logging of Leakesville. As always, there was a lot to consider when making the choice. Dave Godwin of the MFA once again sums it up.
The Mississippi Forestry Association's Timber Harvesting Committee looks at loggers from across the state of Mississippi to select the winner for this award. And they look at a lot of factors. They look at safety. They look at how a logger treats safety. DNR logging has an excellent safety record and places a high emphasis on safety. They look at how the logger takes care of their environment where they're working. And so DNR has a great track record of using the state's best management practices to take care of the environment, to address things like water quality concerns, erosion concerns, resource concerns. So they check that box for sure. They look at their business model, and in 2022, logging is a difficult business, and DNR logging has done a really good job being successful business people in the logging business in this modern era. And they look at how they're engaged in the community and community service, and DNR logging is very active within their communities. So DNR really checks all the boxes that our committee is looking for in a winner for this award, and we're proud to call them our 2022 MFA Outstanding Logger of the Year.
DNR Logging, owned by Randy McInnes and David Harvison, got its start all the way back in 1982. 40 years of hard work in the majestic woods of the Magnolia State. Needless to say, things were pretty different back then. It was a humble beginning for Randy and David's company.
Hot. Just a chainsaw, a cable skidder, and a Mack truck that didn't have air conditioning or power steering. You couldn't find anybody nowadays to drive that truck. That'd be hard to do, find somebody. Things have evolved over the years to be a lot safer. We get 20, 25 loads a day, and we never crank a chainsaw. And years ago, that's how 90% of your accidents are from sawing. And we don't do that anymore. Changed with the times, and it's been a lot easier and a lot better.
When we started, we had a power saw and a cable skidder and a 55-gallon drum with a hand pump on a pickup truck for fuel. But back in those days, we could operate just about a week on that drum, you know. And now, if that's all we had, we couldn't operate 30 minutes out here.
Randy and David buy their own timber. Over the years, they've discovered that's the way they like to work.
We started out buying our own wood, then we logged for Hood Industries for a long time, and we worked for a few other people and just decided to go back to buying our own timber. I found I'd rather work for myself than somebody else.
Of course, safety is the #1 concern in the logging business. DNR has never had a lost time accident in those 40 years. Randy and David are on the job site itself 99% of the time, and in addition to regular safety briefings, they place a high priority on making sure they know where everyone is at all times. It's safer and ultimately more cost-effective.
The main thing, as far as I'm concerned with safety, is we have to keep up with everybody. You know, we have to communicate. And, you know, we got radios and all this equipment, and you know, we can communicate. Everybody's boxed in, rollover protection, everything on this equipment. But you know, like somebody might get out sometime and walk hunting a property line or something, you know, and if you don't see them pretty regular, you got to find them. And that's the main thing, is just communication.
Everything costs a lot more. Logging rates haven't changed with cost of equipment. You just have to be more productive to make up for it. It's a lot safer. Like I said, we don't have anybody on the ground. Everybody sits on the machine, so that makes for a lot safer operation. Trucks, trailers, all that's a lot nicer, you know, than they used to be. Just everything has changed for the better.
Needless to say, care for the environment is a big part of the harvest operation. DNR is careful with ramps and access points. Water bars are established to prevent erosion. Stream crossings are arranged and roads are carefully managed and rehabbed if necessary. Bottom line, DNR pays careful attention to forest management plans. After all, David says, they want everyone to understand just how renewable the forest is.
The main thing is not necessarily about our company, it's about our industry. You know, a lot of people don't realize timber is a renewable resource. Somebody will be right here where we're standing in about 14, 15 years, and they're gonna thin a plantation here, you know, and then it's gonna go from there. And then a few years later, somebody's gonna do a second thinning. And then years after that, somebody's gonna clear cut it again. I mean, that's how all this timber's got here, you know. It's about people replanting.
Ultimately, Randy and David are men of few words, but they and their crews are known for being easygoing. After all, when you've been out here in the woods this long, it helps to love what you do and enjoy the company of those you work with.
Glad the good Lord has left us here to log for 40 years. Like I said, I've enjoyed it. Been some hard times, but been some good times too. And I'm very fortunate. A lot of people hate to get up and go to work every day, but I don't. I like what I do.
Congratulations once again to DNR Logging, the 2022 Loggers of the Year. Well deserved. Well, next week, an encore presentation of a series critically important to agriculture, stress and isolation on the farm.
In part 1, we meet Nathan Casberg. In this story, told in his own words, we come to understand how and why the opioid crisis has disproportionately impacted rural communities across America.
3 of every 4 farmers and farm workers have been affected. Join us next time on Farm Week.
Remember, if you missed a story, look for past episodes of Farm Week on our website at farmweek.tv.
And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and YouTube as well. See you next week. Thanks for watching.